Caleb went to Belize on his honeymoon. He was talking about how great it was. That's the best time when he coached
But 29th.
I'm gonna do it. See,
Easy for me. That's my sister's birthday, so easy for me to remember. Yeah.
See if they know your
We need a
face.
bigger boat.
What? Oh, yeah. That's the one I was talking about.
For the whole neighbor, for the big, yeah, the condos.
You can look her up online.
Right. Civic activism. I like it.
Well, you know, Gerald Flynn said go local.
What goes local?
Go local.
I don't know who. I don't know who they are.
That's 100% true. You know that's true.
I'm not doing federal and state anymore. I used to know.
Tell Greg and he.
This is somebody in Washington,
Right?
and that's it. Sounds familiar, yeah. I think she called her. Was it Sandra that you talked to about the Carbondale? Sandra? You remember who it was? You said the lady. I tried to call her back. Well, one of them is asking about the road. It's not really the rezoning, but the road. Did that say rezoning or just Carbondale? Okay, well, I think they called Greg about some road that GDOT's doing around the railroad tracks. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully they get line first.
Ah, here we go.
No, we can't do anything.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, bro. What's up,
Waiting for you.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, we have some missing glasses.
I borrowed them from a gentleman.
Did you loan this gentleman some glasses? He wants his money back. All right, we're already solving problems. We're solving problems here tonight. Well, I'm excited to see all our active citizens here tonight for our June 24th, 2024 Dalton Whitfield Varnell Planning and Zoning Committee. This is the Board of Commissioners, but our Chairman Litterdale runs this meeting for tonight, and he'll explain the process.
Thank you, sir. First thing tonight, we do have a quorum. Jody McClurg is absent. Second item is to review the minutes of the previous meeting and vote on them. Octavio
Second.
makes a motion, Chris seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes for the previous meeting are in the record. Tonight, we do have, was it 7 items?
We've got like 40 people out in the hallway, and we can't get the extra television to work. So, I don't know if I should just bring them in, let them, and stand underneath the wall, or what we should do.
I don't know, you may have a,
Robert, we got 40 people wanting to get in. I don't know if we got room.
I mean, it's just up to the fire marshal.
I would say.
Are there speakers? Can they hear?
I mean, I think you can leave that door open. You know, they can stand, around that doorway. Or, I mean, I can go call the chief and find out what the occupancy is.
You want to just tell them?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a little delay here because there are a lot of folks outside, and we're trying to see if we can get them in or we can get them to at least be able to hear what's going on. As soon as we get that worked out, we'll start the meeting again. Trying to get the fire.
He's on the phone. He's calling Ed.
We're just checking with the fire marshal, too.
He's on the phone with
He's
Ed
on the phone with
to see what the capacity.
I don't think. They'd have to stand.
Well, we need to, most of these people is, are here for Dog Gap Road.
Can we move that forward?
I mean, that's for number one. Most,
Doug Gap
We
thing forward.
reorder the agenda so they can.
so Dog Gap can get it live here.
He just said you got to maintain 3 feet wide aisles, 2 places.
What do you think? Can we change the agenda and move that Doug Gap one forward?
Maybe do a poll and see who's here.
Sure. And you can also, yeah, you can do that one first, and then
Do
if
that.
people want to stay, they can.
Yeah, I'd just take a poll. Yeah, take a poll and see who's here for what. See how many of these crowds.
Yeah, you can ask them to come in afterward.
I mean, most
People in
is
here for
the
ones
Dog
later
Gap.
down the agenda. I don't know.
All right. Can I have your attention, please? Those of you who are not here for the Doug Gap rezoning issue, could you raise your hands? Would you mind stepping out for a few minutes and we'll get the Doug Gap one taken care of? Because most of these people are here to hear that. We can get some more people in here. We'll let you know when we get that taken care of. So Robert, Ethan, we'll just move, can we move that up to the first one?
Yeah, just,
I'll make a
Okay.
motion to move, to amend the agenda to allow the Doug Gap rezoning to be the first item discussed.
All right. David seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. It's number 2. Second one?
second.
All right, well, let's wait for these folks to get in here.
He's coming.
Hey, Gene?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I reserved you a seat, sir. Good deal. Thank you. All right. There's 3 up there, so we'll sit right here. Okay. I'll sit. Wait just a minute. And I'll give you.
Yep.
Okay, tonight we do have 7 items that are in the county, and last 5 items are in the city. The first one, really item number 2, or B, we're going to move up to number 1. I think that's what most of you here are here for. But before we get to that, Mr. Ethan Calhoun from the Northwest Georgia Regional Office will review the procedures for tonight's meeting and the paperwork for those who would like to speak against any issue. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's meeting will follow a set agenda. We should have copies of that out front, outside the door to the right on the table. If anybody would like to have that to follow along. The procedure for tonight's meeting is an opportunity to hold a public hearing to hear comments for and against the items on tonight's agenda. So the procedure for each of the items on the agenda will be the same. And that procedure will be, first and foremost, the chairman, Mr. Litterdale, will introduce the item on the agenda and open the public hearing. At that point, I will go forward to the podium and give a presentation from the staff with a recommendation to approve or to deny the rezoning. Once my comments have been heard, the chairman will ask for the petitioner. That's the individual who is requesting to rezone their property to come forward and address any questions that the Planning Commission or Board of Commissioners may have. Once the petitioner's comments have been heard, The chairman will give an opportunity for anyone else in the crowd who's in favor of the item to come forward and state why they're in favor of the rezoning. Once the comments in favor of the rezoning have been heard, chairman will open up the floor to those who'd like to speak in opposition. It's very important, based on state law, that if you are going to speak in opposition, that you fill out one of these forms, which we have printed off for you out front, and we have pens out front to fill those out. If you're simply here to oppose the rezoning, you don't have to have the form filled out. The form is only for those who wish to speak. So once you fill that form out, please make sure I get that before you approach the podium to make your comments. Once you've done that, you can address the Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners, with your remarks. And once the opposition's remarks, there'll be opportunity for multiple people to speak. Once that opposition remark has been made, the chairman will give an opportunity to the petitioner to come back forward, address the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners to address the remarks that were made in opposition, to come to terms on if any of those issues could be mitigated. Once those comments have been made in the rebuttal, if no new evidence is presented by the petitioner, the chairman will then close the public hearing. And at that point, no further public comment can be heard on that item. So if you plan to speak, make sure you speak within that window. Once that public hearing has been closed, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. That same procedure will follow for every item on tonight's agenda. Once all the public hearings have been held in the meeting, the chairman will move into the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, and that is where they will deliberate and make a recommendation that'll be sent forth to the Board of Commissioners, the Mayor and Council of the City of Dalton. So no final action will occur tonight in terms of an approval or a denial, only a recommendation made by the Planning Commission that will be sent forward to the governing authority. They will make a final decision, likely during their next meetings, which will most likely occur in July. Tonight's purpose of the meeting is for a public hearing to hear comments for and against. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Ethan. All right, the first item on the agenda is Jose Rangel. Are you here?
No, I think the one that you, it's the item number, one on the number, this one is the one that everybody's here for, D, item D.
Somebody's over there talking about, no,
No.
another message.
Item D or
Item D, I believe, is the
B,
Yeah, Jose Luis Rangel.
D.
B.
B.
D, okay.
I'm the property manager on Mr. Rangel's property.
No,
I can speak on his behalf.
okay. We're talking
Do you have
about,
him to,
we're talking about this one.
yeah,
Okay, that's B.
yeah, that's all right. That's B.
So somebody's over there to speak for him, Manuel.
So, Ethan, do you have any paperwork on him as the property manager or as a authority?
But the petitioner is present.
The petitioner is present? Oh, okay. Very well. So Jose Rangel is seeking to rezone from transitional residential R6 to high-density residential R7, a tract of land located at 119, 123 Dublin Way, which is just off Foster Road. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here we can see the request to rezone from transitional residential R6 to high-density residential R7. Looking at the zoning map on the screen, to summarize a staff analysis, one of the points is whether or not the proposed rezoning would be in conformity with what we see in this area in terms of zoning and existing land use. And when we look at the zoning map, we do see this R6 transitional residential island, which includes the subject property and one additional property adjacent to the east. When we look at the rest of the zoning map throughout this area, we see an almost entirely R2 low-density, single-family residential zone district with only one small island to the west of commercial. When we look at development within this area, we can see that overall, with the exception of the subject property and the single property to the east, all the rest of the development in this area, with the exception of that one property previously mentioned, are all zoned and developed for low-density, single-family residential use.
close look at the subject property, you can see its current state as well as the petitioner's proposal. The petitioner's proposal would be to add an additional duplex to the subject property. Currently, the subject property contains a single duplex, which you can see in the aerial photograph. The proposal would be to build an additional duplex on the northern portion of the subject property, which you see highlighted in yellow as an approximate location proposed for that secondary dwelling. Within the R6 zone district, the subject property could technically support up to a quadplex, which would be an equal number of units, but it would have to be a single structure, not two separate detached structures. And that's the reason the petitioner is here, is they are proposing to build a secondary duplex dwelling which would be detached. And currently, based on the site, it's difficult with the site plan proposed to determine whether or not an additional building would be overall feasible or the addition of an expansion of the existing structure. But overall, we can see the petitioner's plans here. But as again, we look around surrounding the subject property at the development, with the exception, the property adjacent to the east, also owned by the petitioner, we can see that the surrounding development is low-density, single-family residential, the low unit per acre density, significant setbacks, very different from what we see on the subject property. So to say the subject property is certainly unlike all of the adjacent and surrounding nearby land use. Here on the future development map, we see the subject property within the suburban neighborhood character area. This character area in the comprehensive plan's future development map is intended to protect the integrity of the established neighborhood suburban type development throughout the county, most of which being post-World War II cul-de-sac or standard suburban style single-family detached residential development. That is exactly what we see in this area, extremely consistently, one of the more consistent developed areas in the county, being low-density single-family residential, single-family detached dwellings. The proposed rezoning would create an island of high-density residential in an otherwise majority single-family area with only a very, very small island, including the subject property, that has any potential for any multifamily development. So to say this rezoning would be in conflict with the intent of the comprehensive plan, because an R7 zone district would create an entering wedge with an increased potential for density in this area, unlike what we see throughout this area. With all that in consideration and concern with other factors related to environmental issues such as the flood zone, which impacts the entire subject property, which creates other issues both for the subject property and its perpetuity as well as properties in the area affected by the flood zone. The staff recommendation for this rezoning is a denial, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions up here?
No,
Thank,
sir.
Thank you.
thank you, Ethan. Mr. Rangel?
We don't have any comments.
Please come on up so we can recognize that you're here. So you are the developer?
I'm the property manager. My name is Manny Meza, and we don't have any additional comments. The gentleman here to the left pretty much explained what we were trying to do. And, I mean, R6 allows us to build a duplex attached to the existing structure. We just wanted it to be separate. But if it gets denied, then we'll probably just go with the original plan. So we have no additional comments.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Does anybody else like to speak in favor? All right, who would like to speak in opposition? To give your sheet to Ethan? I had done it earlier. Okay, that's good.
It's there, Russ.
All right, it's fine.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, thank you for making room for people to come in. That shows the transparency of this commission. I just want to say thank you for that and for all of you to hear. As you can see, there are an awful lot of concerned citizens along Doug Gap, and that's why we're here this evening. My name specifically is Russ Delosier. I've been a resident of Dalton for 22 years. Went to school at Georgia Tech, disappeared out of the state for about 15 years, got back to Georgia as soon as I could. I love Dalton, okay? I love Doug Gap, I love this area. That's why I'm speaking. Ethan, you could have presented my case. I think you did a fabulous job. And in just a minute, there's going to be 3 other people speaking along these lines. But we're not here to oppose anything. We're here to support something, and we're here to support the existing plan, just as Ethan explained so well to you. Now, in support of that plan, you do have to consider the concern. You know, the previous slide out there showed it an island. I think you described it very well, Ethan, as an island, and it is. It's an island in a sea of green. And so specifically, what we are here as concerned citizens to say is be consistent with the plan. In just a little bit, you're going to hear a transition from a C2 to a R2 on that same exact road. You're going to see me talk in support of that. I'm in support of not spot, zoning. And you'll find this group at Doug Gap that way too. So here in just a moment, I'm going to ask Steve Laird to come up. He'll speak on some of the details of this request. Then Amy will join, and she'll speak of the various concerns of precedents. And then last but not least, Curry will finish us out. And I'm sure there's other citizens in the Doug Gap area who'd like to speak. But again, keep in mind, I'm speaking in support of, not the rezoning request, but in keeping consistent with the plan, just as you saw earlier. So, I thank you for your consideration. Again, thank you for opening chairs here.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Laird. I live at 1513 Habersham Way and have for 20-some-odd years. As Russ said, I appreciate the work y'all do. It can't always be fun. I know it's a good time on occasion, but probably more often it's hard work. In reviewing the documents provided, one of the things I just wanted to mention quickly is it would help Ethan and it would help others, I'm sure, if the application was complete with regards to having a preliminary site plans with all the requirements, with having the parking plan. Neither of those were really submitted. We got this drawing, but it didn't have a detailed plan, which made going into this a little bit harder than it should have been. Taking the position, though, if we say it's in conformance with the zoning ordinance, I agree with Ethan's response and with Mr. Mesa's response that there is no need to rezone this property to R7 since the additional duplex could be added onto the existing structure. That's what it appears was done to the adjoining property that's also joined R6. You could build it under the current R6 zoning, turning it into a quadplex without a problem. However, the property, I'm not sure, is conforming if you got out there and actually did the measurements. You're looking that it's Ordinance 341 says you got to have the same standards for a public road that are required for private roads. Dublin's a private road, as I understand it. So if you take a look at it, in order to get out of this unit, you have to back onto Dublin Road. So that's not something that's allowed. You're not supposed to be able to back onto a public road. So I'm assuming that applies to the private. They need 3 parking spaces for this particular existing unit. There really is 2. So the main issues are, if I'm taking a look at this, I'm not sure there's enough room on the vacant property, even when the 2 parcels are combined, to build the proposed duplex, extend the existing driveway, provide the listed parking spaces, and provide for a buffer. It also doesn't appear possible to hit all the zoning requirements with regards to setbacks. So if you look at separation, and this would be something Ethan can address, but 381 talks about separation between buildings. If we assume that the existing structure and the new duplex face the public road, which I think is how they work, then the front of the new building should not be less than 50 feet from the rear of the other building. There's definitely not room for anything that size. So if you look at it and say, if you did all this, one concern I have is safety. If you look at it, the current driveway to me, is one way, maybe 10 to 12 feet. And I look at that and I think, what happens if you had a fire? What happens if you had an emergency? You'd have difficulty, it really should, if you expand this, you probably ought to look at going to 24 feet instead of the existing 12, but there isn't room for 24 feet. So safety is a concern. And the last thing would be, to quote what, following up on what Russ said a minute ago, it's an R2 area. It's largely green. You've seen it. We'd like to see it remain an R2 area. We think that would be consistent with the Whitfield County Joint Development Plan. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and next up is Amy.
It's a tag team.
Hi, I'm Amy Grammer. I have lived in LM Babb Estates since 1981, and I can tell you that I'm here to discuss precedent and traffic numbers. So we have current traffic along Dug Gap Road in 2020. There was a study completed for the city of Dalton by Goodwin Mills and Kaywood, determined that more than 14,000 cars traveled Dug Gap Road each day, with numbers to reach expected 18,000 in the next 5 years due to just R2 residential construction. That's the farms that are on the lower half of Dug Gap Road, okay? As a result, in an effort to move traffic off of Walnut Avenue and into Dug Gap more expediently, the city has an access road in the plans. It's currently on hold because of some issues with the outlet mall. But basically, it's to get traffic off of Walnut Avenue because Walnut and Dug Gap is a Loss E intersection for 52, which is Walnut Avenue. It means it's the most traffic accident intersection in the city of Dalton, with the exception of Hill Road and Airport Road. So they're the most accidents there. Loss control on Dug Gap Road capacity analysis results indicate that the intersection of Dug Gap and Walnut is the worst trafficked intersection in the city of Dalton, second only to Airport and Hill. Foster Road alone, those numbers went from 1,490 a day in 2020 to 1,620 in 2022, with most of those being through traffic to Dug Gap and 41 in order for traffic on the lower side of Dug Gap to avoid Dug Gap Road because of the high traffic. Rezoning not only allows for more vehicles, but it sets a precedent for any other property development on the south end of Dug Gap to be R7. Development that would encourage more high-density growth along Dug Gap outside of the current plan. So we are also saying that this is inconsistent with the adopted Whitfield County plan. Dug Gap Road cannot be widened because of the power lines that are down the side of Dug Gap Road without taking out several houses along the way. So you're going to have traffic issues the more going south that it's developed. So R2, as the county has already adopted, is currently the only plan that's feasible for maintaining Dug Gap Road's traffic numbers at 18 to 20,000 cars a day. Curry is next.
I'm short. Okay. I'm Curry McClurkin. I live off of Southview Drive up above Brookhaven Circle area, and we've lived there for 25 plus years. As you've heard from our group, and we are representing over 200 people that met this past January to fight another R7 rezoning, the bill clearly does not match the suburban classification as set forth in the county's own plans. And it in no way matches what is in the surrounding area, which Ethan has pointed out. This bill, if allowed, will have detrimental effect on the area and detract from the whole reason people want to move to the Dug Gap area. R2 is single, well, that's what we want, single-family dwellings, and we want to keep it that way. Allowing a high-density build in the middle of a low-density is not a precedent that needs to be set. It will have far-reaching impacts for Dug Gap community, and it seems it may lead to future more or larger high-density builds if the rezone is approved. We think that it might have a more of an effect going forward in the future. Based on what we've shared, the number of constituents that showed up to communicate their opposition And because it's inconsistent with the comprehensive Whitfield County Joint Development Plan, we ask that you do not approve this rezone. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, I think pretty much has touched everything. And very well put together. We appreciate that. Do you have any, would you like to respond to any of these points?
I mean, if we can provide a floor plan, if they would like to see, or this body would like to see, we just wanted to separate the lot, so they,
No.
so it would be,
Yeah.
but again, with the existing zoning, which there's already something that been added on to the adjoining property, we would just follow the same kind of floor plan that they did.
All right, thank you. With that said, have any further questions? Commissioners? Thank you. Well, we'll close the public portion of that meeting or on that issue. And we're going to have to move on, so if any of y'all, the dugout group, give up your seats. Yeah. Go through the building inspector, right? For setbacks and things? Yeah.
First time in several months.
It's a big crew, I gotta give them a minute. Is it? Yeah, I know, but it's not an issue, is it?
That's a really,
I think they're pushing.
you can say if you want to.
See, basically, it's a house that they want to continue using. They probably want to get a loan, and they can't because it's currently commercial. Because somebody must have had a nail salon in the back or something.
It helps because it's commercial and they want to make it residential.
We can't override them if we.
It's already here. The other one is better. It helps. The other one is
It supports them.
yeah. Okay, that's what.
All right. We're going to move on back to item A. Let me get myself organized here.
Ramirez.
Yes, Leslie Araceli Ramirez, are you here? Okay, just checking. Okay, this issue is to hear a request from Ms. Ramirez to rezone from R2 to R5, tract of land on 205 Richardson Drive in Dalton. This is in the county, though. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We see here a request to rezone from the low-density single-family residential to R5 rural residential. When we look at the surrounding zoning in this area, we do see the R2 district commonly throughout this area. We also see that's surrounding the subject property north, south, or north, east, and west. We also see the general agriculture zone district largely to the south. And we can see the subject property is kind of in the middle of this pocket neighborhood between these two larger commercial zone districts out off the highways. In looking at the existing development in this area, we can see very similar to the zoning map, low density, kind of general agriculture to the south, larger lots, mostly forested, undeveloped. To the north, we see mixed lot sizes, low density, single family residential, and we see some commercial further away from the subject property, east and west. A close look at this area will indicate that a number of the properties surrounding the subject property to the east, particularly adjacent to the property, as well as several in near proximity that are not conforming are to low-density single-family properties. They are in fact non-conforming for several reasons, and that main reason is that several of these contain manufactured homes, which are not permitted in the R2 zone district. Several of the adjacent and, or a couple of the adjacent and nearby properties zoned R2 also have additional single-family detached dwellings. Most of those additional dwellings are in fact manufactured homes. Subject property itself is in the same situation. You can currently see the subject property has a single-family detached dwelling as well as manufactured home, and it had that for some time. The petitioner's request would be able to zone the property in such a way that it could be divided and become a conforming status. The property could be separated. In terms of the future development map, again, we see the suburban neighborhood character area. Differently from what we saw in the previous case, this property and this request is not dissimilar from what we see established in this area, given the fact of the number of non-conforming properties with a very similar, if not identical, character to the subject property. So considering that factor and the unlikelihood that this would have a negative impact on the values of the adjacent area or the essentially the established character and pattern of development, staff do not see this as being an entering wedge or some sort of a spot zone or anything like that. So the recommendation in this case would be to approve the R5 rezoning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramirez? Do you have any comments or anything you'd like to add? Feel
No
free.
comments to add. Thank
Nothing to add?
you. Nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? Very well. That closes the public portion on that one. Next one is Mark Souther. Are you here? It's to rezone from suburban agriculture to rural residential R5, tract at 2248 and 2250 Brown Road. This is in Whitfield County. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a request here from suburban agriculture to R5. And this request was prompted in order for the subject property to be able to be divided very similar to what we saw in the previous case. So currently there is a single-family detached dwelling on the subject property as well as a manufactured home on a single tract of land, which would be non-conforming. The only zone district, or two zone districts where you can have two detached dwellings would be either be the high-density residential zone district or the general agriculture zone district. And the general agriculture zone district requires a minimum of 5 acres for the subject property, but this property only has 3.6 acres and could not meet the minimum for general agriculture. So the only way to be able to separate the subject property and create conformity, the ability to divide this property so that each of those dwellings would have its own tract of land and be in conforming status would be an R5 rezoning to be able to divide this property. As we look at the surrounding zoning, we can see that this area is, the subject property itself is entirely surrounded by all adjacent tracts by the general agriculture zone district. That zone district, as I mentioned, requires a minimum of 5 acres, and we see here conformity among all those adjacent general agriculture properties. The suburban agriculture zone district allows lesser intensive agricultural use of the property with single-family detached residential use. Manufactured homes are permitted in the SA zone district as well as the general agriculture zone district. We do see very close to the subject property the R5 zone district. We see it sporadically to the north, but we see it more consistently to the south, near Lower Kingsbridge and Boyles Mill Road intersection. So the R5 zone district does exist in this area, very near proximity to the subject property, although not directly adjacent. In terms of development, this area, by and large, we see very low density, mostly forested. We do see the lower density residential and low intensity agricultural uses. And again, to the south, along Boyles Mill Road, Lower Kingsbridge Road, we do see that smaller lot size and that more R5 rural residential character, which is what's being proposed for the subject property. It's worth stating that the existing character of the subject property would not change if the zoning is approved in terms of its existing built environment. It would allow for the subject property to be divided and become a conforming property. Another close look at the subject property, again, very heavily forested, so it's difficult to see details in the development. And when we look at the future development map, what we see is this area is part of the Rural Agricultural Reserve, adjacent to the preserve, which is largely associated with wetlands and areas that are difficult to develop. And we see the rural residential area just a little to the west. So the intent for the Rural Agricultural Reserve is to preserve rural and low-density agricultural character in the county. And again, looking at the subject property, based on its existing character, the proposed rezoning would not really change the character of the subject property because this area is not, sewer is not available and things to promote any sort of higher density that would be dissimilar from what we see, very similar to this, just to the south of the subject property. So with all those factors in consideration, the staff recommendation for this rezoning is that this rezoning can be approved. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
None? Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Mr. Souther?
This property has been R5 for a long time, probably 30, 40 years. There's been a mobile home there since I can remember. I've owned it for 20, 25 years. It's always been there. The lady left that was there. She just renting a spot, you know. And so she leaves, and I didn't know she was gone for 2 or 3 months because I didn't, you know. But when I found out she was nowhere to be found, I wound up having to have the trailer torn apart, moved the whole night. It took time. Well, which, you know, I didn't really press to have it. Nobody wanted to put a trailer back in there, so I didn't really, you know, push it. So it's probably been a couple of years now. So they changed it back from what the zoning was, which allowed for that trailer to be there, you know, for that mobile home to be there. And that mobile home was there. There's 3 places on that, and those people work for the Sims Dairy, and they've been there forever. And I have a guy now that wants to put a mobile home there, and I told him, you know, go ahead, I don't care if you want to do it. That's the reason I'm here. That's the reason I was wanting to get it rezoned back like it was before. I don't know when it got changed. You know when it got changed? I mean, how long
So
ago?
was it over a year that it wasn't?
They said if it was over a year, they changed it back to, you know, where, and then so this guy goes to apply to put a mobile home there, they wouldn't allow him to do it. So,
Okay.
you know, that's the only reason.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor? Anybody who'd like to speak in opposition?
I'd like to say that
You need to come on up.
I'm good right here.
No, you get the microphones. This is being recorded.
Okay.
Have you provided Ethan with a form?
Yeah, do I need it? I
No.
didn't bring it.
That's good.
Yeah, I've been in that neighborhood for 45 to 50 years.
Yeah, I can have your name.
Brian
address.
Keith.
Brian Keith, your address?
And
Your address?
2220 Lower Kingsbridge Road.
Okay, very good, go ahead.
And we've seen quite a few things go on out there. And we want the community to get better. And, you know, we hate to see some of the same come back in. So,
What do you mean by some of the same?
well, I realize that everybody has to have a place to live, but it's just not been the most cleanest environment of some of what's already been out there. And,
How long has it been vacant?
do what?
How long has it been vacant?
How long has it been vacant?
The lot that's there?
Yeah.
Well, it's on the other part of the property. So I guess what I'm saying is moving more of what's there in. I wish y'all would think about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else who'd like to speak in opposition?
I'm June Bryant,
Go ahead.
and I've lived there for better than 50 years. My land borders Souther's land. I remember when his father bought it, George Souther. If this county bought the Sims Dairy Farm, and they bought the wetlands, so the Sims Dairy Farm is across the road from us. Mark's land is 3.6 acres, is bordering mine to the right. He has not been out there to look after any of this, and I've took some stuff from my garden and give to the people, and there's a block house that's still there. The woman died, she had a stroke. Her husband still lives in the block house. He has not kept it up. There's an old trailer, I think Jonathan Hawkins, I believe it is. Pulled it on, he agreed to have Jonathan Hawkins pull an old trailer on the land there. It's not his trailer, but it's Jonathan Hawkins, he agreed to do this. And, I don't know how many people's been in that trailer. Several. Well, it's several. And, this is not well kept up at all. We try to keep ours up. And there's the jugs and milk jugs and the stuff's thrown out in the yard and behind the trailer. At one time, I called the building inspector to find out who was responsible for cleaning this up. And about a week or two later, Mr. Souther and his son came out and started getting this stuff up. And I asked him, is Brent Hulliner at the time was the building inspector? And he told me that he had already asked him, but he hadn't come out. But I called him. I reckon it took another person besides the building inspector to come out and get him to do it. But the mosquitoes, it was warm. Mosquitoes and bugs and everything would have been humongous if this hadn't been cleaned up. But the part that was the trailer at the time that he cleaned up, they've been gone for years. Burgess was the last name of the people who lived in it. And her husband died and she left, and the trailer fell in. Mr. Souther still didn't come out and clean it up. I had somebody do it.
Okay.
After I complained about it.
Hey, just a minute, now, go back and forth. All right, sir, stop. You'll get a chance to
Okay.
get back.
And I would just love to see it left alone. Let it grow up. It was grown up, and I reckon he got an offer. And they came out with this bush hog or backhoe or whatever it was and chewed the trees down. They'd grown up, they were big trees. And one of the trailers is still there, somebody lives in it. And the blockhouse is still there, this man still lives in it, his name's Dan Quinton. He still lives in the blockhouse. Nobody ever comes out and cleans or anything. And the people in the blockhouse told me that one time that everything that was fixed on any of that come out of their own pocket. Nobody came up with it but them, the people that live in it. So I'm afraid if anything is rezoned or he can move anything else in, that it'll go the way it's been.
All right, so your main problem is it's not kept up.
It's not kept up
And you're
at all.
afraid that will expand.
And it will expand.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else like to speak in opposition? We'll take this last person.
My name is Roger Sage Ralston. I live at 2630 River Road, which is on around from this site. And while I am a strong proponent of private property rights, and I understand that, River Road and Brown Road, I own property on both of those roads, and we just see that as a very pastoral setting. A lot of people drive through, look at deer. A lot of bikers come through. And I'll just be brief, I'm opposed to having another mobile home come in on the site. It's just not, to me, it doesn't fit the nature and the character of where River Road is headed. There's a lot of nice development that is occurring there. And so for that reason, I respect Mr. Souther's desires, but I and a number of neighbors are opposed. So,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for letting me speak.
All right, let's give Mr. Souther a chance to rebut.
When I bought that property, or my father bought that property, I guess it's been 30 years ago. It's the way it is now, and they pay me very little to keep their mobile homes there. They're gonna be somewhere. And I don't see it as a problem. It's always been that way.
Let's ask a
It was
question.
worse when it's Sims Dairy.
It's not your neighborhood either, Mark.
All right, no back and forth here.
Just a real quick question. I got a little confused when the lady, she mentioned several different units, and how many actual mobile homes are on the site today?
One.
So there's one, and there's a stick-built house there as well?
It's a block house.
Okay, a non-manufactured home, so it's a block house and one mobile home there
Yeah,
today?
and a site for another mobile home. When the dairy was there, that's the right, property on the right, John Sims, people that worked for him for the dairy, they lived there. He provided, plus other places also there.
Okay, so you've got one block home, one mobile home?
Yes.
And you
But they're on
wish-
different road, this is on this road, this is on the, it's the V,
Okay.
River Road, Brown Road.
And you wish to add an additional mobile home?
No, put it back, there's always been one there, on the River Road side. It's, I mean, the
So
side
there's
is
two,
there.
there's a mobile home there now and a stick-built home there, right?
Yes, yes.
So you're wanting to put a third one or substitute a new one for the one that's there?
No, a new one,
So there'd be three?
yes,
There'd be a stick-built house and two mobile homes? So
Yes.
An additional mobile home?
yes,
Okay.
where there's always been one. As far as I remember.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? We will close the public portion on that request. The next one is Mandy Blankenship. Are you here? She's seeking to rezone from general commercial C2 to R2 parcel on 614 Foster Road. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We see here a request to be rezoned from general commercial to low-density, single-family residential, R2. When we look at the rezoning request, the reason this request is being made is that the subject property currently is developed with a single-family detached dwelling. The petitioner's request is made in order to bring this property into conforming status. Quickly looking at the zoning map again, this area very consistently R2. We recognize near the previous agenda item. This is an island or a spot zone of commercial zoning entirely surrounded by residential zoning. What we see here is a development of the area. Again, we see very similar to what we saw before, single-family dwelling. And here we see the suburban neighborhood character area, exactly the same as we saw in the previous hearing. And much like the previous hearing, what we're dealing with now is a spot zone or an island of dissimilar zoning. By changing the zoning, it would bring the subject property into conformity and create a much more consistent zoning map and ensure the development character of this area is protected. That would be in direct alignment with the comprehensive plan, so the staff recommendation is in agreement and recommends approval of the rezoning to R2. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
None here, none there. Thank you, Ethan. Ms. Blankenship?
It's just a site-built house.
Name and address for the
Mandy
record.
Blankenship, 930 Little Prospect Road.
Okay,
It's just a site-built house, and because the zoning at some point was put to commercial because the previous owner cut some hair in the back, I can't close on a loan because I need it to be residential.
Yeah, so you have no intention of
Nope,
working the
just
shop
go back
either?
to a house.
Okay, very good, thank you. Anybody else would like to speak in favor?
My name is Russ Delosier. I live in the Doug Gap area, 106 Chickering Way. I stand here in support of this rezoning from C2 back to R2 because I promised you I would come back here and support that. And I've got about 100 other people I can make a quick phone call to and show support of this because it's consistent with the Whitfield County comprehensive plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody who'd like to speak in opposition? Very well, that closes the public portion on that. All right, Brian Spence, I saw you earlier. There you are. Brian Spence seeking to rezone from R7 high-density residential to transitional residential R7, 2.62 acres located at the corner of Dawnville Road and Brooker Road. This is in the county. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This request would be reducing the overall land use intensity potential for the property by rezoning from high-density residential to transitional residential. And you all may be familiar with this property. It was probably a year or more ago that the previous owner, I believe, had proposed to rezone the property for high-density residential. The property was rezoned, and it previously was intended to be an apartment complex. The petitioner's rezoning, as we see it today, was with the intent to be able to develop approximately 10 new tracts on the subject property. They would consist of a mix of duplexes and single-family detached dwellings. The petitioner could go into greater detail on the specifics of the mix of density, but overall, what we see is a great reduction in the potential unit per acre density on this property. We look at the zoning map, we can see that there is R7 high-density residential zoning to the north. We see a lot of higher density residential zoning, particularly to the north, along Dawnville Road from the zero lot line residential, high-density residential. And again, this area has a mix of development. Moving west, we have the commercial around the intersection in Cleveland Highway, and then we have an island of heavy manufacturing adjacent to the east of the property. So in terms of changing the zoning map, this would reduce the overall intensity potential for the subject property and would ultimately be a better fit for the subject property. And of course, any buffers would be required along particularly the west boundary of the subject property where this property is adjacent to the low-density single-family zone district. Next, we see the development in this area, very similar to the zoning map. We see more of the R2 development to the south of the subject property. And to the north, we see primarily the higher density, higher unit per acre residential development and the manufacturing development to the east. Close look at the subject property. It's currently undeveloped. The future development map shows this to be within the suburban neighborhood and adjacent to the community activity center. So this is an area where we see a transition in development from the high activity community activity center transitioning into the residential suburban neighborhood. So we see this as consistent with the comprehensive plan in this transitional area based on the existing zoning and development. And then we can see here a proposal of a preliminary site plan proposing Gale Drive to be extended and connect to subject property, which would allow for the number of lots we see proposed here up to 10 new individual lots, mainly accessing along Brooker Drive and 2 lots accessing Gale Drive along the southern boundary of the subject property. Again, what we see overall is a significant reduction in potential intensity in land use, which would be less trip generation and less potential impact to any of the adjacent single-family detached dwellings. And while there would be 2 additional units that could access Gale Drive, that would be limited to only those 2 units. The rest would access Brooker Drive, so we don't see a large traffic impact impacting the residential community to the south, which is of a lower unit density. Based on all those factors, the staff can provide a recommendation to rezone to R6 for the subject property, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ethan, okay, did you say R6
Yes, sir.
from R7?
Should go from R7 to R6.
Okay.
What is the presently zone?
Seven.
What is zone presently?
It's currently zoned for high-density residential. The previous owner was proposing an apartment complex, and the current plan would be to develop this with individual lots of a smaller size with duplexes or single-family. And in order to get the lot size and the setbacks, they would need to go down to the R6 zoning in order to meet the setbacks and the lot width and lot sizes.
So the transition of residential R7 will be different. How many apartments can be put in under the high-density residential?
That would depend on the site plan to determine parking, stormwater, and all. I believe they were proposing around 30 or 40 previously. So this would be probably about 50% of that in
Which it
overall.
would be much better than the apartments.
Correct. It would be less impactful to the area.
Would be allowed under the R7?
Yes, the apartment would be allowed at R7 as it currently stands, but the petitioner would have to rezone to R6 to get the lot sizes smaller and the setbacks to be able to build as the site plan shows.
So the plat that is presented here doesn't meet the requirements?
Not in R7.
Not in an R7?
Not in R6.
It would meet,
We got some different numbers showing on our presentation.
In the conclusion, should say R6, recommendation for R6.
okay.
It's currently R7, and they're proposing to zone to R6.
Okay, so it does looking to go R6.
That's correct.
So R-
Flip to the
R7.
conclusion, it's currently zoned R7, and the request is to go to R6 transitional residential. I believe there is a typo in the introduction.
So is it a typo here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Correct,
it's
in the
typo.
introduction.
Oh.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah,
Okay,
got it.
I was-
Okay, makes more sense. All right, Octavio,
Yeah.
you good? All right, any other questions?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Spence?
1387 New Hope Church Road, Brian Spence. It's kind of self-explanatory that, that's going from R7 was 30, 40 apartments that Wayne was gonna do, and Wayne backed out, didn't wanna do it, sold me the property, and I wanted to do the R6 where I could have the smaller lots to be able to subdivide it up.
Do you have any problem with that south access to the road?
This is something Wayne done. Mine's not gonna be totally like this. Actually, you'll probably end up losing maybe one lot, or maybe even the back lot, to tell you the truth.
So you're okay with the
Back
R6?
Yes, I'm fine with R6. Yep.
Any other questions for him? Commissioners? Thank you, Brian. Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? Very well. We'll close to the public portion on that. Elizabeth Medina and Jose back there? Okay. This is to hear Elizabeth Medina and Jose Antonio Melendez to rezone from R5 to GA, or is that SA? R5 to GA. 5.02 acres located on Lower Dawnville Road. This one is in the county. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The request was made to rezone from rural residential R5 to general agriculture. And the reason for the request is that currently the property is zoned for residential use. And with a residential zone district, that means that any accessory units or any accessory structures that would be built on the property would need to be built concurrent with a single-family dwelling or a duplex in case of R5. But the accessory dwellings have to be built at the same time or after the actual residential dwelling unit. The petitioner is proposing to be able to build an accessory structure on the subject property prior to or independent of a residential structure. They have not indicated exactly what that agricultural accessory structure may be, but that is the intent for their request. And for them to be able to do that, they would need an agricultural zone district. And when we look at the zoning in this area, we can see this is another area of transitional zoning and land use. We see several different zone districts around the subject property, primarily the R5 to the north, the south, and the east. Across the street to the west, we see the low-density residential, but to the north, we see suburban agriculture as well as general commercial. Looking at the actual development of the area, from the aerial perspective, you can see, again, lower density in this area, mostly surrounding the subject properties, low-density agricultural-like properties. Close look at the subject property, currently undeveloped. And on the future development map, this area is shown as rural residential, which is a lower rural lot density, single family primarily in recommended land uses with low unit per acre density. And we're adjacent to the Community Activity Center, where we can see along Donville Road, where there's a lot more commercial development, community development. So this is again right in the transitional area. Given the potential for impact in the general agriculture zone district and the fact that there is no adjacent general agriculture or any in the immediate proximity, there is a suburban agriculture zone district in the immediate proximity, and the staff recommendation was to allow or to rezone the subject property to SA, suburban agriculture, in order to allow the needs of the petitioner to build an accessory building on the subject property independent of or prior to that of a dwelling, and without opening up a lot of opportunity for other agricultural uses that could potentially conflict with the established character of the area. So the recommendation is, from the staff, would be to rezone the property to suburban agriculture. And perhaps the petitioner could answer more to their specific plans for the development of the property. But staff recommendation would be to approve suburban agriculture. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No? Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a question. I'm confused because through the analysis here, it talks about going to GA, but then the final recommendation is SA, suburban agriculture.
Yes, sir.
Explain to me one more time what the
Yes.
difference.
Yes, sir. So the request was to be rezoned to general agriculture.
Right.
And the only concern with staff is that this is a transitional area and there was no adjacent or really near general agriculture zoning. But there is, if we go back, the suburban agriculture, the dark green that we see on the map near the property. And suburban agriculture would allow what we believe the petitioner's intent is to build an accessory structure, a building, potentially a barn, a shed, or something like that, independent of a dwelling or after or before they build a home. In a residential zone district, you have to build a home at the same time or before you build any accessory sheds, buildings, barns, and this would allow them to build an accessory building independently of a residential building. But because there's a lot of opportunity for animal husbandry and other types of intensive agriculture use in general agriculture, staff recommends to go suburban agriculture for the zoning map and to be respectful of the area, given the amount of residential zoning.
Yeah, you can't have a chicken house there.
It's correct. You couldn't have a chicken house on the property. You couldn't, right, you'd be limited to the same sort of density of animals as you would in the R5.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Medina?
Hi, I'm Leslie Medina. I'm speaking for my parents, Elizabeth Medina and Jose Antonio Melendez. And just to speak a little bit what we want to do, we just wanted to build like a agricultural building or a larger storage unit, just where we can store our personal items, our personal stuff as we fix our property and later build a home.
Okay.
No animals.
So use a storage room?
Sorry?
Use a store?
Yes, just storage, just to keep our tractor supplies, stuff like that.
So do you understand what he's suggesting as opposed to
Yes.
GA making it SA?
Yes, yes.
And that's not a problem?
No, as long as we're able to build that before we build our home, then I think it should be okay.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition?
What?
No, we got somebody in opposition here. Well, uh-oh, she beat you to it. Have you filled out a sheet?
I did.
Give to Ethan.
My name is Susan Baumgardner. I am the Medina's neighbor, right beside them at 692 Lower Donville Road. And you basically just answered my concern, and that was about animals. And my understanding, what you just said, is it's not going to be animals, it's going to be just for housing equipment, more or less. And if per se they wanted to house animals later on, would they have to reapply? Or would that go as standing? They could just go ahead and start putting
There's a
any kind of
restricted.
livestock or?
There'll be a restricted amount they could do. Is that not?
They would have to remove the animals.
Okay.
Well, under suburban agriculture, they could have very limited amounts of
Very
animals. It couldn't be a commercial farm, it couldn't be a large-scale operation, but it does allow for small number of chickens or things of that nature, but not a full-blown.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that, because I'm excited that I'll have new neighbors, but that was a concern because I am beside them and across from them. And I didn't know how that was going to impact.
They would be restricted to a very small amount.
It could not be commercial farming of any
Okay.
sort.
That's
Just
all
very,
then.
very small.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. Sir, do you have?
My name is Scott Malone, and the property north of that property right there belongs to myself and my wife. And our concern was the live feed. And I've met Mr. Menendez out there on the property. He's a very nice guy, and he told me he wanted to build a house, and that's fine. But then when they came back and they wanted it, general ag, I was very concerned about a live feed going on, chicken houses, whatever might come out of that. I'm not opposed to him building a building on his property. That ought to be his right. I'm concerned with a live feed. So when this gentleman over here suggested that the commission, or whoever it might be, came up with the idea of zoning it suburban agricultural, I'm perfectly fine with that. What he wants to do over there is fine with me, as long as it's not a live feed operation. So I'm not necessarily opposed to his great idea. I think his idea is good.
Very
So,
good. All right,
thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. I think that's all we have on that request. Excuse me? I'm sorry. I thought it said something. Let's close the public portion on that. And the next one, Mr. Robert Anderson. Are you here? Okay. Robert Anderson is seeking to rezone from GA to R5, a tract of land 5 acres located at Tunnel Hill, Varnell Road. In Tunnel Hill, it is a county issue. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now we have a request to rezone from the general agriculture to the rural residential zone district. And we see the subject property
Excuse me, back there?
As the area is currently zoned, we see the subject properties within the general agriculture zone district. This area being another area that we would consider to be in transition. While we do see the general agriculture zone district, what we see surrounding the subject property on the majority of its boundaries are different residential zones, that being that of the low-density single-family residential and the R5 rural residential, primarily to the north and the east. We also see that consistently immediately to the west of the subject property. This is an area of sort of a community center area where we have the Northwest High School. We have some commercial uses just to the west of the property near the intersection. And the request here would be to rezone the subject property to R5. So that would not create any sort of an entering wedge or spot zone in this case, because we do see the R5 zone district is very common throughout this area. While it would increase the potential lot density of the subject property, it would be comparable to that which already exists in this area. Again, we can see the existing development, we can see the lot sizes, the type of development, again, in conformity with what we see in the zoning map. Close look at the subject property. Currently, you can see there it has a building over on the far east side. And when we look at the future development map, we see it's within the rural residential character area. Again, for rural, kind of lower density, generally single family, proposed land use that is similar to the densities that we see established, as well as the suburban neighborhood character area, which we see just to the north adjacent to the property. So we would see similar land use zoning and lot size that we see commonly throughout this area. And we could even see the emerging suburban area to the south. So this is wedged right in between and seems like a good fit based on the proposed zoning, the existing density in the area. So the staff recommendation in this case would also be to recommend an approval for the R5 rezoning. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Robert Anderson, live at 203 Revere Run. Basically, when I moved down here and bought the property, with it being on the highway, to get a driveway to the property, I had to buy 5 acres. I didn't really need that much, but I bought the 5 acres. There's a nice building site, a home site on the west end of the property, and basically just want to be able to subdivide the property so we can build a house up there. That's about it.
A house? You say
Pardon?
one house?
One house, yes.
But he will have the ability to,
Well, I wanted to sell the property. It's not me, it's wanting to build the house. I've got a neighbor that wants to buy the west end of the property.
Okay.
It's zoned agriculture, so I can't split it up. So I basically just want to split it in half so he can build a house up there.
okay. Now, what is that structure on the east end?
That's where I keep my personal equipment and stuff.
Is this where they firewood and?
Yeah, you can't, the only farming I'm gonna do there is pines and goats.
Yeah.
There really ain't anything.
No, but
anything
is
else
this
you-
a little building where you could buy firewood, that the guy chopped up firewood all the
No,
time? Or
that's
that's
not
a little
mine.
farther down, isn't it?
Yeah, it's farther down.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just my personal property when
Yeah.
I moved down here.
Gotcha.
Questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition to this request? Very well, that closes the public portion of this. And I think that's the last of the county items. The commissioners will be leaving us at this time. We do still have, what, 4 more?
Yep.
Four and annexation that are in the city of Dalton. Okay. Eric Rojo, are you here? Eric Rojo is seeking to rezone from M2 to high-density residential R7, tract of land .15 acres at 204 East Matilda Street in the city of Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The request to rezone from heavy manufacturing to high-density residential is the intent of the petitioner. Based on the application, the petitioner's request is made to develop the subject property for residential use that would consist of a duplex dwelling. When we look at the zoning in this area, we do see we're in another transitional area where we have a pocket neighborhood, as we would call it, to the west of the subject property and the north. We see several smaller residential lots zoned for the medium density or R3 zone district. And that zone district permits single-family detached dwellings that would be site-built, essentially on a smaller lot than you could achieve in some of the other residential zone districts. We see the subject property is currently zoned for heavy manufacturing use, which is far and above the potential or realistic use for the subject property, and likely is a result of the city's former zoning ordinance, which was a pyramid-style ordinance, which meant that if you had a manufacturing zone district, that you could essentially develop anything on those properties so long as you met the setbacks. With the adoption of the Unified Zoning Ordinance back in 2015, in order to develop residentially, you have to have a residential zone district. So the petitioner has requested the high-density residential zone district to build a duplex. Again, looking at the zoning map, we don't see any inconsistency with this area with being zoned for residential use, as it is much more conducive to that than manufacturing. At the existing development, we can see overlays well with the zoning map. We do see the pocket neighborhood around the subject property, and we do see, of course, a lot of manufacturing and industrial use in this area. Closer look at the subject property, again, we see the same, and we can see that the property actually consists of 2 tracts. And here we can see the plan in the future development map for the comprehensive plan showing the subject property to be within the town neighborhood revitalization character area, which would reflect the pocket neighborhood we see adjacent and would be conducive to the property to develop for residential use. And this character area is intended to encourage residential reinvestment in areas that have not seen a lot of investment in residential neighborhoods or transitional areas. So this rezoning for residential would be in consistency with the comprehensive plan. However, based on the request, we understand subject property and the petitioner's desire to have a duplex, that could be permitted in the R5 zone district and may be a little bit easier with setbacks and things to that nature for the petitioner in the long run to have an R5 zone district for a duplex at this location. And it would be more fitting for the adjacent R3 zone district. So based on all that, the staff recommendation would be to rezone the property to R5, which would be lesser intensity than as requested in the application, but would, based on our understanding of their plan, accomplish the needs of the petitioner and be more similar to the adjacent residential neighborhood. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I do need to make one comment, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but the reason they're requesting R7 is because their lot size is very small. R5 would require 10,000 square feet, which they would not have for a duplex. R7 would only require
75.
100 square feet, which they do have, which is why I recommended they go to R7. So I'm sorry.
It's all right. Based on that, I think R7 certainly could be accommodated at this location. So based on that additional information, I would say staff can support an R7 rezoning at this location based on that statement with the petitioner's desire or plan for the subject property.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rojo?
Hi, my name is Eric Rowe, and I reside right now at 430 Cecil Street. When I came in purchase of this property, there was an abandoned home on it already. So I took upon myself to demo it, clear the land, and now I'm just trying to basically utilize, as he said, I'm trying to bring a little bit more light to the area and trying to invest in Dalton as well, which I think a lot of the neighbors around there, I don't know if any of them are here, but I'm pretty sure they were very happy to see that abandoned building go or be taken out of the location, which I'm sure a lot of them will be as well happy to see something new be built there to actually bring the property value to the area up.
Very good. Any questions? No? Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor? Anybody who'd like to speak in opposition? Very well, that closes the public portion on that one. Next one is Nancy and Dagoberto Hernandez. Are you here?
We are the tenants. Our landlords aren't here, but we are. We have a business at that location.
They're the tenants. All right. Ethan? Ethan, did you get that?
Yes, sir. I do not have a power of attorney. We do not. So if the petitioner is not present.
I'm afraid since the petitioner's not present themselves and you don't have the power of attorney, we can't hear that tonight. We can table this until the next meeting.
We currently have a, temporary allowance for us to be open, for us to be on this meeting, and we were told that our landlords didn't have to be here.
And in writing?
No,
Oh.
I called the office.
I'm afraid that that would not be good enough, would it? We're going to have a written power of attorney. Gene can explain it to you.
So will we not be allowed to operate for the rest of the month, or will our thing be extended?
1 month.
Because we got a temporary allowance for open
Who did you get that from?
from the office.
Well, if it's not in writing, it's no power of attorney.
Yeah, but she wants to know if she can keep operating.
But with C2 being a less intensive use, they're not gonna go in and shut them down for a month, operating in something that's zoned heavy manufacturing, would they?
Depends on if it was there as a non-conforming use. Is that how long they've been established?
So we don't have a city rep here.
What is there now?
Right now, to be able to answer that.
Yeah. Gene?
This is Mike Fowler, he's the chief building official. He did
I'm with
tell-
the building inspection's office. I did give them a temporary occupancy to go ahead and occupy the building for use as a cheerleading studio until the rezoning took effect, and we can extend that for 30 days. Okay, so it hasn't taken effect yet, so you can extend it. All right, you can.
But make sure the actual owner either gives you a power of attorney or they show up for the next meeting.
He will have to provide it.
Yeah, he'd have to get someone to draft it for him, either an attorney or something of that nature. There may be a standard form or something that Gene could help you with, but, okay.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to table that for 1 month?
Yep.
Nobody has objections. All right. Next item is Todd Phillips. Are you here? Todd Phillips is seeking to rezone from medium-density, single-family residential R3 to high-density R7, 4 tracts of land containing 1.29 acres located along Main Street. This would be in the city also. Nathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The request here is to rezone the subject property to high-density residential. As it's currently zoned, it is medium-density residential. When we look at the zoning map in this area, and we look at the existing development in this area, we see the R3 zone very consistently to the north and the east, And we see a consistent R7 high-density zone district to the south and the east. So we're in another transitional area, also adjacent to a lot of general commercial. The petitioner's request for this rezoning was in order to redesign the subject property's current lot layout to create a little bit more of a conventional lot design. And what we'll see here is the existing development in this area. Again, similar to what we saw on the zoning map, we see the residential neighborhood to the north and the east being more single-family detached, and we see the multifamily development to the south and the southeast. Subject property is currently undeveloped. We can see made up of a couple of different tracts. This rezoning request is made to be able to, again, redesign the subject property and create a more conventional lot layout. Here we see that the subject property is split between two character areas in the future development map, those being the medical district and the suburban neighborhood character area. Obviously, the suburban neighborhood character area, again, is intended for maintaining consistency in building type and lot density of established neighborhoods, and the medical district being to support obviously the medical industry that's large represented in this area, particularly to the west and the north, and would also allow higher density residential uses and other residential uses in the medical district to provide housing nearby for medical staff. Here we can see a better idea or a preliminary site plan for specifically the petitioner's intent for design of the subject property, and we can see the cul-de-sac style entrance road and turnaround with a more conventional radial design for the lots as opposed to the current state of the lots. And the petitioner can speak to more detail about exactly what they intend to do in terms of development for those lots, but R7 would create a lot of opportunity for residential development and, again, the flexibility for this lot design. And staff recommendation is the rezoning, R7 rezoning to be approved, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is the actual street name Main or Helton?
I believe the street name here would be, it's loaded as Main Street on the application. Helton Street, we can see there is the access road.
So it's located off
So is it Main, is it Helton or Main?
Hilton.
Accessing Helton.
So the plaza you say secondary street.
Correct. And they would be developing that.
Well, not necessarily a name. That is a secondary street. Okay. You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips?
My name's Todd Phillips.
Your address?
I
Your
did.
address, please?
Huh?
Your address? Address?
My address is 186 Owens Gin Way, dugout. But I'm not here for the dugout thing. What I did is I bought the property and we did developing and we built those duplexes and sold them as individuals at the time. This was back in 2004, 5, 6, the Great Depression. And so I stopped. And so I've owned the property and we had that property approved, passed and everything. And I've gotten older and I've decided that I need some rental stuff. So what I decided to do is say, I'm just gonna build me whatever Gene tells me I can build and build it and rent it. And so when I'm done, I'll just have to sell the whole thing as one piece instead of splitting it up individually. And the cost of putting a road in it'd just wipe me out, so I couldn't do that. So I'm in a different place now than I was in 2004, 5, 6, and 7 when that happened. So basically, that's what I plan on doing.
So you say that the road you could not build?
I could build it,
At
but
least
it would
to-
cost me so much money to build the road, I could never do anything with it. But,
You have to do it to city specs?
yeah, I've already had it passed and approved. But that was in 2004, 5 or something, whenever it was, when the Great Depression hit. I can't remember.
So your purpose is just to rezone so you can sell it?
No, I want to rezone it and build I've got a map. Does you have that? It shows maybe 3 duplexes on it, maybe 4, but I doubt much more than that. And then I'm just gonna rent them.
But to do that, you have to build a road.
No, not according to Gene.
Oh, okay.
An inspector back there, too.
So that's why I'm saying, I'm going whatever Gene tells me I can do, basically. And she said, that's what you need to zone it for.
All right.
And whatever I do, that's what I'm gonna do whatever Gene tells me and Mike tells me, and we're just gonna have some rental property, and one day I'll just sell the whole thing.
David? Done? Everybody? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak in favor or in opposition? Very well. Close the public portion on that guy. John Suttles? John Suttles? Oh, that's you? Okay. He's seeking to rezone from M2 to R5. Tract of land, .76 acres along New Doris Street. This is in the city of Dalton. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property currently consists of 3 individual tracts. The subject or the petitioner's request is made in order to redevelop the subject property with up to 4 new single-family detached dwellings. The property currently contains 2 aging residential dwellings. So this would allow for a redevelopment project to occur. Current zoning of the subject property places it in nonconformity, given that it's zoned for heavy manufacturing use, although it has had a historic use for residential. And we can see this area, while heavily zoned for heavy manufacturing to the south, the east, west. We can see next on the development of this area that along New Doris Street, we do see smaller lots. We do see more residential there than we see manufacturing and commercial use. So we have another one of these small pocket neighborhoods in an otherwise manufacturing area. And again, similar issue as before. Under the previous ordinance, as Zone M2, this would have been permitted for residential development. Now, based on the current zoning ordinance, a rezoning would have to occur as requested in order for the subject property to be redeveloped as it is proposed. Given the, again, residential consistency along New Doris Street and the existing residential character of the subject property and an unlikely ability for it to be developed for any sort of manufacturing use in this area, the proposed rezoning is certainly within reason, and we don't anticipate any negative impact to any of the adjacent properties. The future development map also shows this area to be within the town neighborhood revitalization character area, which again is to incentivize residential reinvestment in areas in need of residential reinvestment to incentivize and catalyze further redevelopment and reinvestment for residential use. So with all that being said, the staff recommendation is to approve with no concern, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
None? Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Mr. Suttles?
John Suttles, 239 Central Way, and I agree with everything he said. He put it very politely, so.
Very. Hey,
Any questions?
Octavia? No. Anybody? Very good.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak in opposition? Very well. That closes the public portion on that request. And the last item. Jose Alejandre? Did I get that name? Jose Alejandre? Are you here?
The petitioner requested,
June was right on here.
Okay. Very good.
so the petitioner requested to annex their property under the 100% method, so therefore they don't have to be present for the hearing. And as we look at this request, this is a very familiar area. We have seen several of these requests. Again, with the unified zoning ordinance, there would be no need to change, and there's no request to change the zoning. This would simply bring the subject property into the city limits, which we can see here. It's part of a small county island along Fraser Drive. This annexation would help reduce that island and create a more consistent boundary by shrinking this unincorporated island within the city. We do not cite any issues with this. The city has approved these annexations that have occurred sporadically over the past several years along Fraser Drive and Hale Bowen Drive. So we cite no issues, no opposition from the city, and therefore recommend annexation.
Thank you. Anybody like to speak in opposition? I don't think we need anything else. That is our final request to deal with during the open portion of this meeting. We will now go into closed portion to deliberate on what we've heard. Just so you know, you're welcome to listen, but you cannot partake in what we're, no questions. The first item is, let's go right to the wrangle, the gap thing, item B.
Motion to deny.
Second.
David makes first motion, Chris seconds. All in favor of denial, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. It is denied. And jump back up to item A. Leslie Ramirez. Let's see, what was that? Any comments, reflections?
Move to be approved.
Okay, Octavio makes motion approve, and Eric seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Next one is Mr. Souther in the county.
I'm still a little confused on this one, because he said, if you look in the introductory paragraph, that he wishes to subdivide the two structures, and then he said that he wanted to move a third structure there. I'm still not clear on what his intent is. You know, and the one lady mentioned, you know, that he said, you know, that I'll let somebody put a mobile home in here, and then I'm still kind of confused as to what the ultimate use of that property
Yeah.
is.
And I'm concerned about the management of the property, too.
That's a separate issue, I think. That would be up to the county to make sure that they clean it.
But now, Ethan, on the,
The opposition that I found or hear from most of the people is the maintenance of the property.
Yeah, that's what I'm
There's
saying.
no keeping. There's
Yeah,
no,
that's what I'm saying.
but the zoning doesn't impose that. That
But-
would be up to the
so,
county.
so in his application for rezoning, Ethan, he stated that he simply just wanted to subdivide what was there.
That was based on what I understood in the application. Apparently, there was a third dwelling that doesn't show up now. But for him to replace a dwelling that's there or add an additional one, they would have to subdivide that property. Couldn't occur in SA as it's currently zoned. So he would have to, all he could have there now is one single manufactured home or detached dwelling. So if any of the structures lose their nonconformity, the only way you could re-add those, whether it be one or two, depending on if the property can support that for setbacks and access, you would have to have an R5 rezoning to have manufactured.
So right now you got a block, just a little rectangle block structure, a mobile home, and he wants to put a third one.
Third mobile home,
On
or
there.
second mobile home, yeah.
Yeah, second mobile home, third structure.
And you have to divide off land to do that.
That's what-
You couldn't just go back, and even if he gets.
You can't be
rezoned,
R5 and put two mobile homes in
correct.
a
You only have
site
one,
built home.
one dwelling per lot. So they would have to divide the property to be able to add an conditions.
That area has changed a lot out there. There's a lot of nice stuff out there. I mean, it has really changed.
So R5, the only thing that he can do is either subdivide it or put one unit per lot. That correct?
You can subdivide the property as long as it can meet setbacks, minimum lot size, and you can have one dwelling per lot.
So he can take that 1 3-acre tract, turn it into 3-acre tracts, assuming, that it's symmetrical, and have a block building, a new mobile home that's not there, and the one that's already there.
Currently, if what's there remains in nonconformity, it can continue in perpetuity as long as it's continuously occupied.
So his stated intention was to allow him to divide the two that are there, and they both can stay there now.
They can stay there.
Yeah.
As long as they remain occupied.
He's wanting to add more, subdivide it, and it's a little confusing. All right.
So what is the choices?
Well, he can leave them there and leave it zoned as it is now, and he keeps the 2 there. Or you go to R5, and he can take that 3 acres and split it up into smaller tracts and put any type of structure he wants on those smaller tracts.
That's what he's requesting.
Well,
For a
his,
mobile home or single family, technically could put a duplex, but you'd have to have a bigger lot.
his formal request was just to split up what was there. He never mentioned adding anything until we asked him, and then he admitted he wanted to add additional mobile home.
He just requested to change it to R5. He didn't specify what he wanted when he did the request, did he?
Well, if you just look, I'm just going off the introductory paragraph. It said the petitioners was made in order to divide the property in a manner that will, have individual ownership of the 2 dwellings, which there are 2 there now. Never mentioned an additional dwelling until we asked him.
But he would have the potential to divide,
As many times as he could per the,
as long as he can meet the
yeah.
frontage setbacks.
And on that 3-acre tract, how many times do you think he could divide it?
Everything with septic, so probably
Yeah,
two.
septic and, well into the area.
No.
I couldn't say with any accuracy.
He possibly could get 4 or 5 out of 3 acres?
Yeah, if it works.
That's a lot different than dividing something for the 2 things that are there.
Right. Of course, conditions can be added to a rezoning as well. That would limit.
Feel like I got a bouncing ball here.
But what is there now could continue as long as the non-conforming status doesn't lapse.
Can a condition be added to the change of, can the condition be added to the change of the zoning to R5 as long as it remain with only 2 dwellings? I don't think we can do that, can we?
No.
I think you need a condition to be able to state something along the lines of similar lot density to the area. I think you need
Because, this thing gets rezoned. He's going to come in and as dense as they'll let him go, and he's going to put a bunch of trailers in there, or as many as he can. Not a bunch, but a few additional. Yeah. And I think that's the concern of the folks that live out there that have, nice homes and acreage, and particularly given his lack of maintenance and supervision of what's there. Some of those, he said he didn't even know the one was vacant for months and months and months, I move we deny it.
Chris makes a motion. Do I get a second?
I'll second.
Eric seconds. All in favor of denial, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. It is denied. Mandy Blankenship, I think that's the easy one on Doug Gap Road.
Motion to approve.
Second.
David, Chris seconds. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Brian Spence,
Move to be approved.
Second.
Octavio, and David seconds. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Elizabeth Medina,
I'd like to approve that one to the SA. It was recommended.
Second.
what, did we? Okay. So that's what was recommended, SA?
Yeah.
Yeah, the SA zoning was recommended.
Oh, it was. We kind of bounced back and forth there.
She requested general agriculture, and then he recommended an SA approval, and they were okay with it.
Okay, Eric makes a motion.
Second.
Octavio seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Robert Anderson. This one is GA to R5, Tomahawk Barland Road. That's the across from the high school.
Yeah, guys wanting to build a house on the
Yep.
Move to approve.
second.
Octavio first, Chris seconds. All in favor? All opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. Eric Anguilar, or Eric Rojo.
Move to be approved.
Second.
Octavio first, David seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Hernandez,
Table.
Table.
tabled. Todd Phillips,
Move to be approved.
Octavio to approve.
Second.
Eric seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. John Suttles,
Motion to approve.
David approves.
Second.
Eric seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Move to approve the annexation.
Chris,
Second.
Octavio seconds. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Annex.
Get that all one color eventually.
Oh, yeah, sooner.
It's at some point.
I don't know.
One plat for you guys to look at real quick. This is the rezoning.
What we just looked at.
John Suttles.
Oh,
City.
okay.
Nope.
Favorable recommendation for 5, which allows 7,500 square foot lots.
Yeah.
I told him to go ahead and do his plat for the city makes a decision.
Go ahead.
He's dividing these into 7,500 square foot lots. I'm sorry, I'm not doing
Right on the money. Ba-da-boom. Yep.
You guys okay with that?
Make out motion.
Move to approve.
Chris approves. David seconds. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, the ayes have it. Any more? That it, Gene?
All right.
Look it up.
Happy Fourth.
Thank everyone for your patience.
Yep.
If you are an applicant, I will come pick up your sign maybe tomorrow or Wednesday. Sir?
She's tried. Yeah. You have to keep calling her, make sure she comes back.
And Gene, we settled on the 29th
Yes, we've settled on the 29th. I've got,
29 what?
got a.
for the next meeting.
You weren't there, Octavio, when I was talking about this. We've got to postpone the application in July to the 29th. So Eric's gonna be the chairman. David says he can come, and Eric says he could come.
You mean Chris?
Yeah, like the mayor.
It's been a long night.
Chris Shefty here.
Long month.
Get a little tongue tied.
29 is, oh, what was it before? 22nd?
22nd.
Where you going?
Okay, so we're formally the 20th. I'll send all you guys a email just reminding you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, Eric. Have a good one. See you next month, sir.
Anything back there?
I don't know. Check them out.
Take them over the phone.
Jeff.
All right.
See ya. Have a good day. Thank you all.
Okay, date it the ninth, is that okay?
No, yeah, that's fine.
Alrighty, guys.
I got everything, always leave something.
Mr. Chairman, I had a quick, no, I'm just joking.
Yeah? Yeah, no, denied. Sorry, guys. Sorry, there weren't no fireworks, we're expecting something.
We gotta wait till the fourth for fireworks.
We can wait till the fourth, that can be in there.
Gene, here's your clicker.
Thank you.